Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Useless Aggression podcast. I'm one of your hosts, James, and joining me, as usual, it's Henry.
Hey, how's it going?
All is going well. How is all going with you?
It's good. Obviously, we now have a website to promote and talk about. So it's actually given me work to do. Like a working day
Yeah,
for me now
boy.
is to come up with some blog posts or things for that. So obviously, there's no subtle plug. We do now have a website where we've kind of taken our podcasts and we've also added blogs. We've added fantasy drafts. If you listen to our fantasy draft episode. And we started booking our own show as well, obviously based on fantasy. But it was a very good show. I would read up on it.
Yeah, it's all going pretty well so far. The website is uselessaggression.com. And as Henry said, we've got like blog posts, we cover news, articles, lists. We've got our other podcast episodes are all on there. We've got our YouTube video on there. So we've just launched this whole thing using WWE 2K18, which was it was pretty crazy. To be fair, we were doing our commentary on a match. I don't really want to talk about the match, to be honest. I'm still pretty raw and upset after cheering for my boy Apollo Crews throughout it, but I won't reveal anything else that happens. Go online, check it out, and see what happens there. And we'll definitely do some more of those.
And obviously, Apollo Crews as well this week on is now injured and can't partake in the Money in the Bank. So your boy has been done dirty twice in very quick succession. Apollo Crews has been done dirty.
Yeah, I was pretty upset with that, to be honest. It seems a bit of a weird. I mean, it's a kayfabe injury as well, so it's not. It seems a bit weird. It seems like they've almost backtracked because of the criticism they've received. But I do wonder who they're going to put in the match in his place, and I'm just terrified that it's going to be Jinder Mahal.
Yeah, I'm hoping it's Andrade, to be honest with you. 'Cause, I mean, it makes sense in that he injured him. But no, as you're right, they've been really bigging up Jinder now he's come back. They've been like referring to him a lot as like like a former WWE champion and stuff. And I was just like, they can't make this mistake again. Like they're already hemorrhaging ratings, which is not really their fault because obviously it's a weird product right now. But if they just do anything with Jinder, like especially when you look at people that are in the match, you are just thinking they can't do it. But equally, they just might because it's WWE and it's Vince. But yeah, no, it's an interesting match on our show. It's awkward because obviously at the start we were slagging off 2K20 for being really really glitchy, and then there's some pretty weird glitches in the match. So we ate our words pretty quickly, and it's a very interesting group of wrestlers. Obviously, we completely randomized it, so we had no idea who it was. So it's a pretty weird group.
It's quite an interesting mix of characters.
There's some good ones in there, but there's some. But yeah, so we digress. Obviously, that takes us to our episode today. Well, one thing we talked about in previous episodes, I'm sure, and we talk about in general anyway, is how much we miss factions in WWE. Like back in the day, you had like D Generation X and Evolution and whatnot. And it was actually a really good. I thought personally, anyway, it made wrestling a really, really good time when you had this sort of like group that dominate everything, like what Undisputed Era did in NXT, where they were like the North American title, the NXT champion, and the tag team champions, and you just have this really like heelish. Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be heels, but this sort of group that just has like owns every aspect of the show. And we were thinking about factions ourselves. There's been an article was released recently as well, which I read on Bleacher Report, which was talking about sort of reimagining modern day factions, like if NWO existed in this day, or obviously any other factions, who would be in them and why. But it got us thinking about if we were to have a faction, which kind of ties in quite nicely to our fantasy booking with our Money in the Bank and our version rosters as well. But like if we were to build a faction, who would be in our faction and why?
Yeah, that's basically the premise of what we're going to do today. We're going to make our own factions up. Recently we've seen kind of a faction with the Monday Night Messiahs. So that was Seth Rollins, Buddy Murphy, and the AOP. And so what we've kind of decided for ours is we need to pick like one main event guy, one mid card guy, one tag team, and we'll round it off with a female wrestler as well, just to kind of encompass all the divisions in one go. So those are the rules that we've set ourselves. We've also said we're not allowed to go for someone like, we can't go for an absolute superstar. So, John Cena will not be leading this faction. Roman Reigns will not be leading our factions. Charlotte will not be leading them. We need to kind of keep it grounded, so to speak.
Yeah, they need to be like some. They obviously can be somewhat big names, obviously, but like there has to be like often like these factions come about with people that have often been like overlooked or they're really really good, and they've just not been given a chance due to injury or whatever, and it's a good way of repackaging certain people and bringing them into either bringing them into the main roster slash the sort of main view of people, or it's just a good way of. I think giving people that wouldn't necessarily get a chance or maybe have had a chance and they've blown it another way to sort of bring them back.
Yeah, and you see in terms of like in the past as well, for like Evolution, for example, that did wonders for Batista and Randy Orton's careers. They both won the world championship through being in Evolution, and then ultimately that's why then Evolution disbanded. But at that point, it wasn't needed anymore. So yeah, factions are good for that, for building people up, and that's the kind of what we're kind of thinking about when we made our own. So why don't you start us off with your faction? And first thing I want to know is, have you got a name for them?
Um, so I have got a name which is terrible, and I can't say it without giving away all the members of my team. So I will get to the name at the end, and hopefully I'll come up with a better name by then because I can't think of anything. Like I wanted to go for something really cheesy, but like because obviously they normally have pretty cheesy names. But either way, I'll get to that in a minute. We'll save the name to the end. So obviously, first I'll start off with the tag team. So it's weird actually to pick a tag team because most of them have a relatively decent outing at the moment. I'd say the tag team division is probably actually the strongest bit of WWE at the moment in terms of like got your New Day, Usos, Miz and Morrison. Then beneath that you've got people like Heavy Machinery and stuff that you could chuck in a title match if you wanted to, and people probably wouldn't care. But equally, they're kind of like a mid card team. And obviously down at NXT, everyone always gets a pretty fair shouting. Annoyingly, and I think you agreed with me, this would have been perfect for the Revival, but
Yeah,
obviously they've been released now, which is a shame because they would have literally been the perfect team. And in fact, I think there were rumors not that long ago where there was rumors that Triple H was going to make like an NXT faction, like similar to Evolution, and I think Revival were going to be a part of that if he did it. I think Kevin Owens was going to lead it. But so my faction anyway, I've digressed a wee bit. The tag team I've started with is Authors of Pain.
oh, well, they're already in the Monday Night Messiahs. What betrayal this is.
But I think this is the thing. I think they're a good. I think they're a great tag team actually. On NXT, they were really, really good. Unfortunate injuries obviously have kind of set them to one side. And it's not a very original pick, I guess, in that sense. But I think they're the team. They're a team that you could have be boosted as a result of being in a faction, especially with some like bigger names, which we'll get to in a minute. But I also think as well they're like actually really good as a team in
Yeah,
terms
they
of
are a good team, definitely.
as a solo team as well. So when the faction inevitably breaks up, they aren't just going to have be successful because they were in a faction. They could be successful in their own right as well. But I think it's they're kind of I think because of injuries and stuff, they've kind of been put on the back seat a little bit. Because obviously, as we are saying as well, with the Raw tag team and SmackDown tag team divisions being pretty stacked at the moment, and everyone knows Vince isn't a big fan of injuries when they put belts on people and whatnot. I think they've kind of been definitely put to the back for quite a while, and even as part of this like Monday Night Messiahs group, they're not a very focal point of it. It's more
Well,
about Rollins and
they've got
Murphy.
an injury again at the minute, haven't
Yeah,
they? Because
exactly.
I think one of them is out for 7 months now, so he's keeping both of them off TV while they're injured because he doesn't want to keep one of them there by
Which is a
themselves.
bit awkward.
The choice, it's an interesting choice. It would definitely work. I would say, obviously, they'll fill the silent muscle character of a faction quite
Yeah,
well.
like the Batista, the silent, like big ass guy you just send in to batter people.
But then, are you missing out on some mic skills here, though?
Well, that's the thing. So I, I think I don't necessarily think you need the mic skills from everyone. I mean, like look at Evolution. Like Batista barely did anything, barely said anything. Like, obviously, it's obviously mostly Ric Flair and Triple H. Even Randy Orton didn't say that much. And then in like D Generation X and stuff, it was mostly Road Dogg and Billy Gunn, Shawn Michaels and Triple H, which is obviously a lot of people to do the mic work, but equally there's about 8 of them. So like, it's always, you always have a designated mic guy, and then you need the broody ass guys in the background, who will just like sit there and look hard, and then obviously then win the tag titles. So I think for me anyway, I think Officer Payne are a good shout for this one. So I was looking at a lot of other tag teams as well, and I was like, Heavy Machinery doesn't really make sense because I mean factions don't have to be, but generally speaking, they're normally pretty heelish. And I can't ever imagine Heavy Machinery as heels, to be honest with you, just because of the way they do stuff.
But yeah, the tag teams have been very tough to fill for this.
Yeah, the teams like Street Profits and stuff are already champions. They're already pretty established. And then when I was looking down at NXT and stuff, one team I was debating using was possibly the Forgotten Sons, the little like biker slash ex armed forces sort of gimmick team. So I think they'd be quite a good one. But equally, I don't think they have quite got that star power, because you need a level of star power. Obviously, we're kind of looking at people that have been overlooked, but you also need to be people that inevitably, if they win the belt, you're like, oh yeah, that's fair enough. Like,
See, that's interesting. So for me, I struggled with tag teams. I'll obviously say my faction after yours, but I kind of had the same issues. I wanted the revival, but so they've been released. And looking through who's a team that needs, a bit of a helping hand to step up. Like Viking Raiders and Heavy Machinery came up, but neither of them will really work. You can't imagine the Viking Raiders having their Viking gimmick in a faction. But when mine is revealed, you'll see I have gone quite low down on a tag team. I did consider Forgetting Sons as well, but also there's 3 of them, so that kind of would go
yeah.
against our rulings. But I yeah, it'll be interesting when I say mine. They're not huge, let's say.
But yeah, I think AOP fit the bill as well. The big sort of broody muscle heel types that can be champions in their own right, but then also can be champions in the sense of they can obviously be backed up by big names. That's my pick for the tag team. For the women's one, this was quite a weird one. Well, it wasn't a weird one. There's a lot of people who I think are either too established to fit in. Like, so I was debating first of all Sasha Banks because I thought she's
Ugh.
often overlooked. I think she's a very very good wrestler. And then, but I also think there are people like Rhea Ripley who'd be great to be in a faction, but equally she can do fantastically well on herself. So the person I've gone with here is a little bit of a. I think it's a slightly left field pick, but we'll see. Is I've gone with Io Shirai.
Okay, that could work. Yeah. Weird imagining her at the AOP though.
Well, yeah, but then it's going to be weird imagining a lot of people with Yopi, to be honest with you. They're big lads. Like, I mean, like, you put anyone with Yopi, apart from maybe, like, Baszler, but then I think Baszler's too established again, or unless you picked
I'm
another one
just
of the four
imagining
horsemen
Io Shirai like coming down to the ring riding one of the AOP like on their
on their
sat on their
backs. It's like, yeah.
shoulders. So
I mean, she's a pretty hench, like, could kick the ass out of you, female wrestler. But Io Shirai, anyway, I think she's brilliant.
yeah,
I
same. Yeah,
think
she's brilliant.
she's one of the best women wrestlers in the company, actually, let alone NXT. And I think as well, having her in a faction, like a big faction, would be a really, really good way to present her to the main roster. So people that maybe don't watch NXT, if the faction just appeared on Raw or SmackDown, you could be like, oh, oh my god, it's Io Shirai. I'm not really too sure who she is. But then obviously she's good enough that she could win people over very, very quickly. And I think sometimes there are certain people where there's not many, but there are certain people where I think actually they'd really benefit from you just straight away pulling the trigger on them and being like, I'm just going to give this person a belt straight away. Like they did with Paige on the main roster. Where obviously she won it on her first night. I mean, obviously she was very established in NXT, but at that point in time, I'd say less people watched NXT than they do now. So there was a lot more people that were like, I've never seen this person wrestle. Who is she? And then bang, turned up and won a title. And I think Io Shirai is another one of those people. I think she's brilliant and she's good enough to have a main roster women's title. But I think the problem that exists with women's wrestling at the moment is the people at the very top are almost I think there's a big divide by the people at the very, very top. So like Charlotte and Becky Lynch and stuff. And then the people beneath them. So, like, I mean, if you look at that SmackDown Women's one at WrestleMania, which was actually a great match, you had Bailey and Sasha Banks, who I think are in that higher tier now, the Four Horsewomen tier, if you like. And then even though Naomi's a former champion, I do feel like there's a big divide between her and Bailey and Sasha. And likewise with Lacey Evans and Tamina, the divide just gets bigger.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like, it comes down to realism as well in terms of like when you have the four horsewomen, regardless of my opinion of Sasha Banks, and like Bailey, I'm not like massively hot on, but I'm a massive Bailey fan compared to Sasha. But it's sometimes weird when you see them getting out wrestled by a Naomi, or you're like I'd say the only other person other than the four horsewomen that you could kind of put. Oh, actually, I'd say you've got your four horsewomen. I'd say Asuka gets in the group. I'd say that
Yeah,
Baszler gets in the group, and I'd say that Alexa Bliss gets in the group. And then in terms of main roster talent, no one else.
I was tempted to put either Baszler or Asuka in, but I don't feel like it. I feel like they're almost too established.
Also,
Um,
if you'd have gone for Asuka and the AOP, you're really, really losing out on anyone who can talk so far. Especially if you've got the great Carly as your champion guy in the group, then you're just going to be weird.
but the thing is that I think Io Shirai as well was their recent sort of heel turn. She has a sort of dark and broody character, which fits AOP, like old AOP, obviously NXT AOP when they had their little like masks and they'd come out like that, and they were quite like a dark brooding team. So I think it kind of fits the same sort of bill in a way.
Is your team name, or your faction name, sorry, Authors of Shirai? Is that why you couldn't?
No, no, it gets better. The faction name. Well, this next one for me. I have to ask a question first of all of how well established do you think this person is? Is he too established to be my mid card guy?
Okay.
Alistair Black.
He's been NXT. I'll allow it.
So my mid card guy is Alistair Black.
God, your mic skills though, you're really dependent on one person to be your vocal guy in the team.
Oh, yeah, it's good. It's my leader's a good guy, I think. And But yeah, so originally when I was like, I really want this like young up and coming mid card guy. I was gonna have of all people actually Tyler Bate, because I'm a really really big Tyler Bate's grown on me a lot recently because I've been watching a lot of NXT UK in lockdown and stuff, and like the guy's amazing. But it doesn't make sense in the realms of having Io Shirai, AOP, who are both heels, and then my leader, who is also a heel, to have this like really like mega baby face guy in there as well. So I thought about who kind of fits the. I've sort of got like a dark and broody element to my team at the moment. So I was like, who fits that very well? It's Alistair Black. The other thing I thought of as well is inevitably when these factions break up, they tend to break up because you'll have like the mid carder guy will turn on the leader guy, and then that sets up a nice little like title feud, potentially title feud. Like obviously look what happened with Randy Orton and Batista in Evolution. So I think Alistair Black fits that bill quite well as well. In that, like, I personally wouldn't complain if he became a champion. I think it would be really, really good. Um, but equally, he could also be a mid card champion now, and it would be really good. He's in that sort of really happy medium level at the moment. But yeah, I mean, there's nothing to say technically about Alistair Black that hasn't already been said in terms of he's just a fantastic wrestler. Black Mass is one of my favorite finishers, possibly my favorite finisher in wrestling at the moment. The whole like out of
Oh yeah, you
nowhere
went for
element.
two finishes on your
Yeah, I was
on
torn
the
between
website, didn't
two, and
you?
they're both kicks as well. Like it's the Claymore or the Black Mass. I'm a big fan of both. I think
They
they're
are
both
both good
amazing.
finishers. I'm completely off tangent. I think the Eclipse is the best finisher at the minute, or the End of Days. But I appreciate the Claymore and the Black Mass as
See,
well.
I love the Eclipse. To be fair, going off, I've got a little tangent here, but I was reading somewhere actually. Apparently, she calls the Eclipse. Apparently, she's thinking of changing that as her finisher because
No,
she calls it something really weird, like the flip forward flip bum dislocator or something like that. Because if you watch her, she lands on a really awkward angle on the side of her like hip bum kind of thing, and that's why she keeps getting injured. So I think because of injuries she's had, she's debating apparently changing. I read that somewhere. Obviously, it could be fake news, But yeah, so anyway, I've digressed a lot. Alistair Black, yeah, I think Alistair Black is a very good mid card person. You could put the Intercontinental or US, depending what show this faction is on him, and he would be a
I
good person
really
to
can't
hold down.
imagine Alistair Black holding the US Championship just because I hate the look of
Yeah,
the belt. It's
I
so
could,
gimmicky and gross. Like, no offense to the American flag, but as
I
a
could see
belt,
him
I
holding the
like.
IC belt. The IC belts,
Yeah,
the new one is even the white one would have looked good on him because it's like a contrast on the color. But
I just hate the color of the US title because it's so bright and vibrant, and I like my titles being golds, and it'd just be so weird seeing him hold the belt. But uh, anyway, that's I know what you mean though. If he was on that show, that would be his level. So yeah,
so at the moment, I think I've got a tag team that could be champions, a woman who could be a women's champion, and obviously a mid card who could be a mid card champion. So my leader, well, no, in terms of mic skills, I wouldn't necessarily say he's incredible, but he's actually good enough, I think, to do the job, and it fits the
oh
bill of the
no,
rest of the people. Why? Who are you
oh
thinking I'm going to
no.
say? Who do you think I was going to say?
Well, I'm just gonna say your team aren't gonna be able to talk ever. But okay, go for it.
My leader was Finn Balor.
Interesting.
So Finn Balor at the moment is a heel. He's a very, very good heel, and on NXT. And also, again, for me, this does create the sort of slightly theme um, of like dark, broody characters, which I've kind of actually sort of realized looking at my list. Actually, that kind of works as a theme.
Maybe they could be called the Brood.
So originally, actually, when I did have Tyler, and I was thinking of having Tyler Bate, I was going to call it Balor's Mustache Authors of Pain Club. And I realised, I was like, okay, maybe that doesn't work as an effective name. But Finn Balor, so Finn Balor obviously looked like, he's another one like Authors of Pain, actually, that fits the bill of seemingly had the world at his feet, and then he got injured, and then a lot of trust seems to have been lost in him since because he's not really had a sniff at a main roster world title, apart from that one time he had that match with Brock Lesnar at Royal Rumble, which wasn't a squash, but it was pretty one-sided. So he's been very overlooked, and I think would be a great champion. He's another person that I think as a heel is he could win a match by himself and people wouldn't complain. But equally, he is a heel now, and you could have someone like Aleister Black run in and do a Black Mass or something like that to help him win. I think he's actually good on the mic, especially now they've kind of let him be this sort of arrogant dickhead on NXT. I think he's actually very good on the mic. And his in-ring work's brilliant. Now we've got him as a heel, he's very ferocious as well. But I think he'd be a good. Obviously, the other link you have here for WWE liking to make subtle links to other companies, but they can't make the actual link because of copyright and stuff. Is obviously he was the leader of the Bullet Club at one point. So it could almost be like the story of Balor having a history of making dominant factions, and then he makes another one in WWE. They kind of tried to tease it, didn't they, at one point with Styles, the OC, and him, but it never came into fruition, and obviously now never will with the OC going. But I just think Finn Balor fits the bill of someone who is actually top of the card, but is often overlooked as well. And I think they have a motive for him to be. I'm going to set up a faction and dominate wrestling, and I think that sort of rounds off my team pretty well. I do have to think of a name for them though. This is the bit I have yet to do.
I thought you had a name.
Oh, Finn Balor's Mustache Authors of Fame Club. Well, there's no one with a mustache in the group anymore because I didn't have Tyler Bate in there. To be fair, though, it's a bit generic, but I mean, Balor Club is probably it would probably be the best way to call it that. But then I was apart from maybe I think of a different thing of a bullet magazine club, shell club, um,
The Pellet Club
the
or the
club,
BB Club.
the club, the gun club. But no, I haven't thought of a name for it. I still haven't thought of a name for it.
Very disappointing because I've got a name for mine, but awkwardly, we've got the same leader.
What, Finn Balor?
I've also gone for Finn Balor.
It makes sense. He's fits the bill superbly. So I guess we're starting in reverse order for your team then, which is called what? Sorry, what is your team called?
So my team are called the United Front.
Okay, I'm getting a League of Nations
Chills
vibe
down
from
your
this.
spine.
I'm getting a League
Kind
of
of.
Nations vibe from this.
kind of in that sense, yeah. Because
Are they all British?
you'll notice a running theme very quickly throughout mine.
Are they going to be all
But
British?
you'll have to find out. But yeah, Finn Balor, same reason really. I think he's got a motive. I like him now as a heel, uh, and yeah, it can kind of be. There's an angle there that he can return to the main roster with purpose to kind of seek revenge for the fact that he wasn't treated well on the main roster, and he's obviously gone down to NXT at the moment. He's got an interesting feud going on with Walter, and that kind of plays in where to some of my other choices.
Oh, I'm buzzing for that match. That Walter Balor
Uh,
match is going to be so
yeah,
good.
that will be an amazing match. The it, I could go and say a lot about Balor, but obviously you've kind of covered everything. That he's brilliant in the ring. Yes, he's got better on the mic now. He definitely deserves more, and he can definitely lead a faction as he used to do with the Bullet Club. So my secondary guy is Pete Dunne,
Yeah, I thought it was going
hence
to be him. Yeah,
the British connection, and hence the word United being in the in the name. Get it? So
yeah. Although Finn Balor awkwardly, Ireland is not part of Great Britain, but or United Kingdom. But okay, I'll give you that.
oh yeah, but
I'll give you that.
to the wide stream like American audience, they might not realize that. That's what I'm hoping. Again, don't want to insult any Americans listening, but
Or
the
Irish, to
whole
be fair.
thing, to be honest, the difference between like Great Britain and the UK and everything that confuses people that live here. So I don't imagine people from like other parts of the world necessarily understand sometimes what the differences are, especially because Ireland is a tricky situation anyway. But uh, Pete Dunne,
Politics aside.
he's my mid card guy. He'll be like my silent muscly type. I also think he'd be the perfect guy for because obviously usually in a faction the main guy might be struggling to win a match and then there's someone runs in like you said Alistair Black will run in to help out Finn for yours. I almost think Pete Dunne would be perfect in the sense of just quickly grabbing the hands on the rope and snapping the fingers.
Yeah, no, I can see that. To be fair,
So that would work really well. And that almost then leads into a sling blade or a running knee, which really leads into the coup de grace. Still hate it as a finishing move, but
well, he's got
whatever.
the DDT now, isn't he? The 1916 DDT.
I like the 1916 DDT to be fair, but
Good move.
that works quite well for that. And equally, in terms of forming the faction, like the groundwork, obviously Walter took the United Kingdom Championship off of Pete Dunne, so it could almost be they kind of set up an alliance to try and help defeat Walter at first, and then they bring this alliance with them to the main roster. On top of that, then I'll pair them with a tag team, which is the Grizzled Young Veterans.
Oh, okay, yeah, British tag. For a minute, I thought you were going to go with Mustache Mountain. I was like, you can't do it
I
because
was,
Tyler Bate is so face. They're just
yeah,
so face. You can't do
they are
it.
so face that I couldn't do it. Whereas the Grizzled Young Veterans they're great heels, and I'm glad they're now getting seen on NXT more because I do really rate them as a team, and I just think they're the perfect tag team to do a bit of shithousery, which is kind of what you want. You just want these gobby people that are just gonna blag their way through situations because they've got backup, but then they'll never admit that that's the only reason they're getting anywhere. I especially like the fact like Zach Gibson being a scouser, just mugging people off all the time is great. Uh, I just think they work quite well, and they'll uh, maybe it's a bit of a stretch to put a belt on them, but I think if they came
That's
up
what I was
with
going to say.
Dunn and
Yeah.
Balor, it would work. I mean, we've seen other teams get belts that are a bit weird, and whereas this is an actual tag team, and I think if you gave them a belt, they justify it in the long run. People at first might raise an eyebrow, but I think the payoff eventually would be there.
They were, I don't know if they still are. They were the first ever UK champions as well, like tag champs, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. Yeah,
So like there is that element to it as well. But I think that's the only thing I would say about it is you do have the element. There is the aspect of like if they came up and won a belt pretty quickly, would people be like what?
but they were the first UK tag champs. They lost it to what they called Mark Andrews and Flash Morgan Webster, I think, and now Gallus have the tag titles. Gallus were another one I was tempted to try and call up.
Yeah, they kind of already are. There's three of them in Gallus though, so
Yeah,
they
that's
kind
the
of
issue.
already are a thing.
I couldn't take them more Forgotten Sons because also at first I was gonna maybe try and make a team that were just filled with indie darlings and just call them like Independents or something, but I went with the United Front because I just preferred the idea. I'm a hometown boy. I'm going to root for my British wrestlers. So the Grizzled Young Veterans would definitely be my tag team in there. And then to round it off, the obvious choice would be Kaylee Ray, as she is the current UK Women's
Women's
Champion.
champion.
She's
Yeah,
also the only one I think that's actually from the UK who's ever won it because
yeah. Tony
Tony
Storm's
Storm and
and
Rhea
Ripley
Ripley,
are both
well,
Australian.
Tony's,
Well, Tony Storm's New Zealand, isn't she? And then
yeah, she's from New Zealand.
yeah,
But also she's a fantastic heel. So she definitely kind of fits the bill. She can talk on the mic as well because I do think it's important for the women in the faction to be able to speak as well. It's fair enough to have some of the brooding silent men, but if they're going to eventually have to have views of their own with, if they're going to want to win the women's championship, and it doesn't work if they're silent and the men are doing their talking for them. They don't need that. They need to be able to carry it themselves. And yeah, Kaylee
I think
Ray.
it depends on the woman because like when you had China, for example, like she didn't need to say anything just to be badass and demand title matches and stuff. But yeah, I get what you mean. Kaylee Ray's actually really good on the mic, so that's a good one.
Yeah, and she's good in the ring as well. She's a very good wrestler, all around wrestler. I don't think, again, in the current era of women's champions, there's a divide, which I completely agree with. And yeah, she probably would be she's not of the level of the Four Horsewomen, for example. That being said, I think she's just as good or better than people like Naomi, who've won the belt, or Lacey Evans, who's been teased to win the belt, or definitely better than Tamina because everyone is, because she's terrible.
She might win. She might win at Money in the Bank. I'm umming and ahhing about that possibly happening.
Oh, well, then maybe she can have a fantastic match against Nia Jax if she wins the briefcase, and they can just have a bore fest. Um, but yeah, I definitely think Kaylee Ray's someone, especially if they're strong enough as a heel and they've got enough backing around them. Again, someone you could put a belt on, and people would boo because they're heels. Like they wouldn't be like, "Oh, this is a terrible decision." Like they were booing Jinder Mahal. They would be. I think they'd be invested in the heel character. And then eventually, obviously, everyone loves Pete Dunne. He'd be playing a heel in my faction, but when Pete Dunne inevitably ends up, getting a title opportunity and turning on the faction, people love him now, so they're definitely going to love him then when he flips back to being a face. And boom, the United Front.
No, I like
There it
that.
is.
I like the sort of like British side. It would have been brilliant for this. Would have been Bad News Barrett back in the day, but
Originally, if I could have had a faction with people who've left, yeah, I would have had Bad News Barrett 100%. I'd have had the Revival in there. I would have probably lost the British Front on this bit because I would have had, I'd have had the Revival in there. But Wade Barrett, for me, the perfect leader for a faction.
he could be like a manager. He could like come back and be a manager
Yeah,
for
Stu Bennett, or
your.
whatever he's called now. Or it's called in real life, to be honest. But yeah, because obviously he did a fantastic job with the Nexus. They were incredible and were robbed when they were obviously beaten at SummerSlam by Cena. And then,
And he was like
it,
the de
it,
facto leader of the League of Nations as well, wasn't he?
yeah, the only
Um,
issue with the League of Nations is they were created with the sole purpose of getting Roman Reigns over. And
yeah,
that was the issue. They were never built to be a faction that was actually good. I saw Sheamus said this in an interview recently. He was saying like, yeah, the League of Nations were okay, but the whole reason we existed is because Roman Reigns needed to beat us, and that was it. And that was a bit sad because when you look at that group of people, like Wade Barrett is one of my favorite wrestlers within the last X amount of time with the WWE until he left. Um, Rusev was in it, wasn't he?
yeah. Rusev. It
And
was Rusev, Sheamus, and who was the other one?
Alberto Del Rio.
That was it. Yeah, I think it was Del Rio.
Alberto Del Rio can go. I don't really care about him, but Sheamus again, like he's all right. I loved him in the bar.
He could
I've
be a
not
he
been
could yeah he
massively keen
outside
on
of the
him as a
world. He's had a couple
singles.
of world title runs. To be fair, like
Yeah, he's not
he's
he's
a
not bad,
reliable
and
person. He's a good like transitional champion. I think
yeah,
is
and
Sheamus.
Rusev is obviously great. Again, he's gone now as well. So the League of Nations should have been better than it was. It's just a shame it was set up for that terrible reason, and also it was a bad name as well. So they could lose that. But anyway, that's me off talking about another faction. I'm all about the United Front. It's Balor, it's Kaylee Ray, it's Pete Dunne, and it's the Grizzled Young Veterans.
Do you know what
Boom.
I'm gonna call mine? I'm gonna call mine. I was just thinking of words of like Balor Club, and then you said it about Finn Balor coming up and getting revenge. So I'm gonna call it Revenge Club. Boom, job
Oh,
done.
that's a terrible name.
It's better than the United Front.
Nah, the United Front, you can imagine, like when they're doing a beatdown after the match, you can imagine Michael Cole going, "Oh, now the despicable, United Front."
The Balor experience.
The Balor experience sounds more like a glam rock band
No,
than it does a
that was taking
faction.
the piss out of the Viking. Do you remember when the Viking Raiders came up
Yeah.
and it was the Viking experience?
Then they changed
Like,
it really quickly to the Viking
I don't think they
Raiders.
somehow transitioned from like War Machine to War Raiders. I mean, obviously that was because of like copyright and stuff, but like
Yeah.
War Raiders and then just the Viking experience.
The Viking experience is the worst. Yeah, they changed the name like 4 times in quick succession. That was definitely the worst one. That's even worse than the League of Nations as a name.
Well, the League of Nations was like the old name of the UNs. There is that element of that to it.
Yeah, but this is
But it was
wrestling.
still a terrible name. Like, and they had that really shit theme as well.
I don't want to see a faction called the G8 coming up at any point, or NATO.
I mean, but yeah, but then like, you have like, you know what I mean? It's still like that's the logic behind it, but it was terrible, and they had like a really crap theme as well, didn't they? It was rubbish,
They should have called themselves the International Experience.
or just the Roman Reigns jobbing club.
Yeah, that's more appropriate.
But no, those are factions. I think both. I think both work. To be fair,
So yours is the Revenge Club, yeah?
I can't think of a name, so that's what I'm going to go
Okay.
with. Revenge
So
Club.
there you go, people. There's the Revenge Club and there's the United Front. So I know which is better. Henry won't admit it, but he knows which is better. But who do you
Oh, no
think's
way.
better?
What team's way better? What are you chatting? What team is so good?
No. So let us know what you think. Like, get in touch with us on social. Maybe pitch some of your own factions that you'd like to see. And of course, subscribe to us on the podcast. But not just subscribe to us anymore on the podcast. Visit the website, uselessaggression.com. You can read our blogs, read our news, read our lists and articles, watch our YouTube content. And yeah, Useless Aggression, it's going to continue to grow. And we thank you very much for joining us here. If you want to get in touch with us on Twitter, we're available at UselessAgPod, or individually, I am at Citadel James.
I'm at Henry Rogers 94.
And thank you very much for tuning in, and tune in again to the Useless Aggression podcast.